Doesn't that music just get you fired up?
It does.
Like, this says college football is coming, boys.
It really does.
Nothing says college football like a marching band. I love every minute of it.
So welcome in, everyone, to Colorado Collegiate Focus. This is episode number 1. Why don't I introduce myself a little bit first? I'm Jonathan Cronenberg. You can find me on Twitter at JohnKNFL. Why don't we go to the left of me and start with Tony? Why don't you introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Tony Casolo, lifelong Colorado Buffaloes fan, attended the university, obviously. You can find me on Twitter at Lots of Boba Fett, and you can find all of my writing work at Colorado Buffaloes Wire if you'd like to hear my thoughts on the team.
Perfect.
And I'm going to point right down here to my buddy in the South, in Air Force.
All right. Welcome, everybody. This should be an interesting endeavor. I'm Rick Baum. I am representing the United States Air Force Academy Falcons. You could find me at Falcon 8 Fan on whatever we're calling it this week. We'll go with.
I think we're sticking with Twitter until someone gets it. Really officially says, "Hey, look, we're gonna type it in x.com instead of Twitter."
Excellent. So I am. I've been called a lot of things. Some of those include, but are not limited to, Air Force Insider, Air Force Superfan, et cetera, et cetera. I write and contribute to 9 Air Force pages with a total of little less than 20,000 followers. Very close to this current team, especially, and I'm really looking forward to what the three of us can navigate this year.
And it's only 9, Rick. I mean, we can't push that to double digits here. Come on.
Well,
you can't get that up just a little bit more. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, hey, Tony, upon further review, I forgot we just launched this week. That would be double digits.
There we go. That's what I like to hear. And we need to put some respect on Rick's name because once again this year, he has been named the best account to follow for Air Force Falcons football. So,
and that
well done, Rick.
Yes,
well done, Rick.
Very well job. That is 3 out of the last 4 years. Am I correct?
You are correct.
That just speaks volume of your knowledge and your ability, as like you said, you're kind of inside with the team. So it really is going to be something special for you to be able to be a part of this. So thank you so much. Why don't we talk about a little bit of what this pod is going to be about, like the vision, what we're going for, and really what we want from you in order to kind of connect with us as well. And this pod, the main reason is a lot of fans in Colorado, at least in my opinion, they have one team maybe that they root for, but a lot of us have, we root for all 3 Colorado teams. And I think we need a podcast where it's somewhat positive for all 3 teams. We want them all to be successful. We're all in the state of Colorado, especially with different conferences now. I mean, we'll see later what happens. But this is kind of one of those things where you can root for both teams, except for, Mountain West CSU versus Air Force. But we can talk about that a little bit later. I think that just coming down to this is basically we want to reach the different kind of everyone in Colorado, and that means other colleges as well. Any guys you have thoughts on in this pod that you want to kind of convey as well?
Yeah, I mean, well, obviously I've always been a CU fan. I attended the university and had a blast doing it, but I've always been a guy that's absolutely in love with Air Force football. The as me and my brother like to call it, the pure form of football, where you're trying to run the ball down their throat every single time. And even when we look at a team, normally people would say, oh, you probably hate CSU. I hate them 1 week a year. Other than that, I want them to succeed. You get a lot of guys like a Cecil Sapp or someone that makes it to the NFL, and I'm like, oh, he played at CSU. I hope he does well. So it's just one of those things where you truly want Colorado football to be at its best. And for it to be at its best, all 3 teams need to be pulling their weight. And that's what I really want to accomplish by talking about them on this podcast.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with both you guys more. I've got a love for Colorado sports. I always have. In reference to Air Force, my journey as an Air Force fan started at the University of Colorado. Single father, had my daughter is a grad, was a student there. the first thing I did after we moved her into her dorm was get season tickets. And, the product they were putting out at that time was painful, to say the least. In the 4 years that I had tickets, they won 3 home games. And
sounds like my college years.
Yeah,
yeah, you're talking about our college years. Yes.
Yeah, I went through a couple coaches, and somebody invited me in 2009 down to come back to Air Force football, which I had followed as a high schooler. And I came down and I thought, man, these small guys are the David and Goliath, and they're very organized and they communicate well. And guess what they do after they graduate? So I was sold.
Yeah, I completely understand that. And again, someone who went to CU as well, there was those painful years where, hey, 4 wins would be, very exciting for us and those kind of things.
Right.
So I really do love the team. It's just a matter of, I want to, be around while they're successful and not say, hey guys, you remember, my first memory of CU was when they were in the Fiesta Bowl in 2001 or something, like that, where it was Joey Harrington. Literally, it's been that long for me to have kind of a team where I feel like this is a real team that can accomplish big things. And so I'm very excited to see what CU can do. I'll be obviously handling more of the CSU side, but I also think that they're on the way up. So I think the great thing about Colorado right now is they have 2 teams ascending, and you have Air Force, who's kind of already reached that pinnacle, and now they need to kind of replenish through their pipeline. So you kind of get a nice cycle of what's going on for these different teams and be able to watch some different situations.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I think you mentioned it, and I think we'll kind of start to dive into it this way. That conference matchup there between CU and CSU, or I'm sorry, CSU and Air Force. Those have always, and probably for the foreseeable future, continue to be conference rivals. Where do we see that conference going into 2023, Rick? Where do you see Air Force? Because they were a team that was towards the top of that conference last year. Are they a team that's going to stay there?
To be honest with you, and this is probably the toughest part of this conversation, is our last 3 full seasons were 31-8. And there's no way any program can maintain that. I do believe we've got one final push this year, and then I think we're going to have some young guys that are going to have a little growing pains. I really believe this will probably be the last season, the 3 of us, to where I'm representing probably the most successful team. There's going to be some growing pains, and I'm. We're all ready for that. It happens. We had back-to-back 5-win seasons the last time we had a reload. And, because of COVID eligibility and some things that we call affectionately known as turnbacks, we have reloaded one more time. And this will probably be the last big push. And you guys have programs. I mean, CSU has so much promise, so much talent. And CU has bought a really good team.
Yeah, they did do it that way.
Money well spent.
Yes, it really was well spent, because this program is going to be selling a lot of merchandise, the tickets for games. Good luck finding one for a reasonable price. Those kind of things. It's a different era for CU, and for CSU. Again, I see just an ascension coming. But when it comes to Air Force, one thing that I'm personally excited about is they do have a pipeline that it feels like they're starting to build very well for 2024, 2025. Again, we'll have to see how they all develop and all that turns out in the end, and who stays. Obviously, you'll be able to talk a little bit more about that with the sophomore rule and how they're able to do that when we get into the nitty gritty. Some, maybe this pod or maybe another one. But it's one of those things where I think that they're at least doing things the proper way, where I see this team being able to reload, and in 2 years they're back where they're at. So that's where I'm very excited for Air Force. And again, CSU did a fantastic job themselves in recruiting this year. CU, I have to admit, I felt like they fell a little bit behind with some of the things going on with Sanders and Coach Sanders and his injury and just his leg. it makes a difference when you can't speak to the head coach. And I think that's one thing that I noticed. But I think they'll rebound pretty easily. Again, they'll be able to steal some players that have already signed on technically officially with other teams. So I think CU is in a fine position.
All right. When we kind of look at that Mountain West landscape, I consider Air Force to kind of be one of those teams that should be knocking on the door of a championship appearance in the Mountain West title game this year. Colorado State, I think, like you mentioned, they still need a couple more years to reload, get that balance. Where do you see them ending up here this year, John, as far as like where they can balance out within the conference?
Yeah, I think that, within this conference, I think that there's still going to be the team behind Boise State, the team behind Air Force. And, for me, I still even question San Diego State and Wyoming. I'm just not sure if they're there yet. It comes down to how well they've been able to practice. I know that this new line is completely different compared to last year. You only have one player returning as a starter. He switched positions. So for me, when it comes to CSU, I see this being almost, again, a brand new team, just with some players that are, again, healthy, those kind of things. So they were at 4-8 last year. I see that going up, at least to 5 or 6. Honestly, I think that for them, they should be aiming towards that bowl game eligibility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. I even as a CU fan, I absolutely love everything I hear come out of Jay Norvell's mouth. He is the kind of coach that you just want to run through a brick wall for. Like that man,
Right.
That man was born to be a coach. And I would say the same about a Troy Calhoun. Very different mentality. I got to speak with him for just a little bit at one of the Colorado summits last year, but
Nice.
he is very even-handed. And I again, just every word that comes out of their mouth gets me motivated, ready to go play. It is unfortunate, guys, but we're going to have to talk about some somber news right now. Okay?
Okay.
We are going through the death of a conference, which is shocking to say. But can you believe the state that the Pac-12, or I guess the Pac-4, is actually in right now? I would never have thought about this. When Texas and Oklahoma were getting ready to leave the Big 12 last year, this is what I thought we would be saying about them. But now you look at it after all the USC, UCLA moves and the 4 schools going back to the Big 12 or new members of the Big 12, this conference is dead. What is going on?
It's ugly.
Yeah, it really is. This is the Pac-4, whatever you want to call it. They're hanging on by a thread. It feels like right now 2 of the teams want it, Cal and Stanford being the higher education, higher education as they see themselves. We can argue that at another time, but they want to be part of the ACC, be a part of a conference that has, a good reputation in terms of their schools, be able to share their journals, those kind of works. But besides that, man, there just isn't much left. I don't see where those teams really, what conference would really want them, honestly, to be frank. I don't see anyone saying, hey, I need Wazoo right now. Give it to me.
Yeah, and I mean, what's sad is when you look at a school like an Oregon State, to have the kind of season that they did last year, double-digit wins, kind of break through. You're bringing in athletes like a DJ Uiagalelei, and now all of a sudden you're basically without a conference. I mean, so obviously John and I have that tie to the University of Colorado. How has that looked in your mind, Rick, to see a conference just completely die?
Well, we're creatures of opportunity at the Air Force Academy, and I see a lot of opportunity here.
Mm-hmm.
I really believe that the death of the Pac was a greed factor, right? They got big aspirations about some of these numbers in the TV contracts, and they said, "Oh no, we won't even consider this." In the meantime, it was already in the works on this massive realignment. So at the end of the day, I see some chances for your Oregon States and your Washington States to come and join us in some capacity. And then you've got some really good geological rivalries, right? You've got your stuff, up in the Pacific Northwest area. And, your Boise State, Washington
Right.
State, your Oregon State, Boise State, some of your stuff with San Jose State in Northern California. I mean, I really believe that this is beneficial to our growth, and it may even give us other opportunities because there's other conferences that that have been inquiring. So I'm excited.
What do you call the new conference if they merge together there? Do you call it the Pac-12? Do you go with what the Mountain Pac
that
or
name
what?
has to
Mountain
go
West.
away. Yeah,
Pacific Mountain West. All right, there you go. I like that.
I like that as well. That way you can, still have the coast and it feels geologically correct when you're stating it for once.
It's funny you guys mentioned the term 4-pack. Back in the day, a 4-pack was Bartles and James wine coolers, and no man would be seen with a 4-pack.
Right.
So exactly.
Right.
All right.
That's fantastic.
Are you guys ready to move over to a different team and just kind of talk about teams now a little bit? Which team do you want to talk about first?
Let's do Air Force.
Let's do Air Force.
Let's do Air Force.
All right.
We're ready for you, man. Let's do Air Force.
I said that because I love that intro. That intro is awesome.
Yeah, that intro is awesome. I love it. Especially again, if you had your sound up, man, did that feel like it was booming in at you. And that's what's great about a lot of different games when you're able to see the flyover. Honestly, that is a great recruiting tool. But Rick, it's Air Force time. I will let you take the stage. Go ahead. This is yours.
All right. Well, I have a very similar feeling that you just described, and the thing about those flyovers that makes them so special, it's not so much the visual, which is amazing, but it's that feeling in your chest when those birds get over you, and man, that really gets me excited. I get a similar feeling when your two animals hit the field. Ralphie and I think it's is
Cam
it
the
Cam?
Ram?
Cam
the Ram. Yes,
that's a very simple explanation. And we have our Falcon,
right.
And our goofy mascot like you guys have. So.
Exactly. I mean, the one thing about the Falcon though, I always think about it. How did it must have been so hard to train them to kind of come up from above and then find the trainer. It's always been, I always like those kind of things. But like you said, those flyovers, I love the different kinds as well. When you're able to experience not just, if you go to one or two games, you might experience something similar. But when you're able to feel maybe the helicopters and all the different kind of tapestry of kind of what we have in our defense department, man, it feel good.
I got to take in my first game last year. I got to go up there to watch Air Force kick CU's ass, but the atmosphere was awesome. And let me tell you, that stadium is beautiful with that mountain backdrop and all the trees and everything around it. It is gorgeous.
Yep.
When we look at the actual team, though, Rick, they're going to be replacing a great quarterback in Zeke Daniels.
Right.
What do you see out of the offense here?
Well, that's a heck of a lead, and it actually just gets even more daunting. So when you talk about replacing a 3-year starter, I mean, typically you've got a young guy that you've had your eye on, typically maybe a redshirt freshman that you guys deal with, or maybe a sophomore who's seen some time. Well, guess what? We don't have any of those. We have 3 seniors. We have some guys that have seen the field because we've had some opportunities there. But last year was the first year in the past 15 that we have had a starter start all of our games. Typically, with running the triple option, your quarterback will not be healthy enough to start an entire season, and that is rang true year after year after year. So we got a situation, this year where we're going to have to dig deep. We've got some really good candidates, and I'll get into them in a second. But the next part, the hardest part, I believe, we lost the nation's leading rusher. So Brad Roberts is at Eglin Air Force Base in Florida, and he is serving the country. Yes.
And a former Ralston Valley Mustang. So shout out to my alma mater there.
Oh man,
Go Mustangs.
I had no idea that we had some RV alum. I actually have a close friend and a current player that's on the roster. We'll talk about him. He's a RV, our tight end Caleb Rios. So, with Brad leaving and unfortunately not getting on with any NFL team, which is a travesty in itself.
Let's just I want to hear your just 3 seconds on this, because I think as a just a fan of football, I don't think he was given a fair shake, even though it sounds like he was brought on to the Commanders for a little bit for that tryout, but it didn't sound like it was a fair opportunity to really earn a spot on the roster. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. So Brad is what they affectionately call is a tweener, right? Doesn't have your fullback size. He doesn't have your tailback quickness. He's got a routine that has been worked for him as far as he targets the opposite shoulder. So defenders lead with with their front shoulder, and he targets their back shoulder, and it has made him one of the best ever in Air Force history. So he's serving the country. We will hear his name at some point, I believe. And he's kind of regrouping. So it's going to be a challenge, to say the least.
That's great to hear, though, that he's been, still working. He's able to, do his job with the Air Force at the same time. I think a lot of us are rooting for him to see a roster and get that opportunity, because, film rules over kind of the combine and those kind of things. And he had the film.
Oh, yeah. And to Tony's point earlier, another Arvada guy, right? Somebody, Brad, I've known since he was about 9 years old, playing down the street at Pee Wee football. So last year was really special to me and to his family, of course.
That's awesome. Yeah. So, just kind of getting back into the roster, I think you mentioned, if you have senior quarterbacks, you're going to have a lot of guys that have run the triple option a lot. But not only when you look at that, you look at the running backs and the fullbacks that could potentially be starting this year for Air Force, you see a lot of seniors there. So even though maybe they haven't been starters, have they been guys that know the offense well enough, that triple option offense, to rebound with losses from a guy like Daniels and Brad?
Yeah. In our case, we kind of got one of those rare gifts, right? So the guy who backed Brad up was also a senior, Emmanuel Michelle, good yards per carry guy, good short yardage guy, has broke some big runs in his Air Force career. He had some personal stuff go on. The end of last year, was unable to play Baylor in the bowl game, left the campus, attended to his personal issues, and then reapplied and was initially denied, which is, kind of par for the course. And then upon reexamination, him and another player were readmitted. They're currently on the roster. They are awaiting the final NCAA approval, which looks to be on its way. So, yeah, Emmanuel Michelle is an experienced guy. And then behind him, we got some amazing, guys that'll probably see some starts. We got a guy by the name of, and get this with our intro, his name is Jet.
You go.
Yeah, so
love it.
Jet Harris,
perfect,
and Owen Burke, and a plethora of young guys. So fullbacks, I don't think we're going to miss a beat there.
Okay.
And so redoing those positions, thinking about guys like Jensen Jones, Ben Britton, Zach Larrier, the 2-time 200-meter Mountain West track champion. We've got some really good options. And, officially, we're still undecided. Unofficially, I think, we'll see probably to lead out the season, the fastest guy. So we know who that might be. But when it comes to game managers and pure passers, Jensen Jones is a guy who catches my eye. Ben Britton is a guy who was 1 for 1, 80 yards when he came in last year. that's I would say that's a pretty good passer rating.
Yeah.
And the
Rick,
thing,
just to
go ahead.
kind of add a little bit onto that, to me, it feels like Jensen Jones can handle the pounding throughout the entire season. He's kind of built more that way to take a pounding, initiate contact even when need be, to get some extra yardage. Do you feel that's going to be the similar kind of tone that other quarterbacks are going to be able to set, or are they going to be kind of more of a, try to get away from contact, stay alive? What are you looking at between the different quarterbacks and their running styles?
Yeah, great point. Zach is a lighter, fast guy. He's probably, no more than 185, 4.2 epic speed. Jensen's got about 30 pounds on him. And, with my lead, with the wear and tear of this offense, I really believe that the bigger, stronger guy is going to have the advantage. And regardless, it's a position, right? So next man up, I really think that they're going to find their guy probably sometime mid-game against Sam Houston, the second game of the year, and probably roll that into the one of the biggest stumbling blocks we've had recently in playing against Utah State on a Friday night.
Yeah, and I was looking. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay, I was looking at kind of just the sizes of these guys. I mean, yeah, you look at a guy like Jensen Jones. He's listed at 6'2", 215. That's way bigger than like the guys that I remember. I was a big Sean Carney fan growing up, so he was 5'10", $185, something like that, probably. And I mean, Jensen, he's a big dude, be lumbering down the field like that. That's got to be appealing.
Man, I'll tell you, and he's really done it the right way. Of course, he's got the great attitude, and he'll do whatever's demanded of him. But he's been working the last two off seasons with somebody from the current Pac-4, Gardner Minshew, the starter at Jacksonville for a while, and before that, Washington State, of course. And those guys, I've seen such a change in this young man the last 2 years, and I'm looking forward to whoever they put out there. Zach's a burner, Ben's a thrower, Jensen is a little bit of both. So yeah, it's gonna be pretty fun, I think.
So are Daisy Dukes okay in the uniform code then?
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. I know what you're saying there. We're not talking fashion here. We're talking football.
Yeah, exactly.
That's cute. So, really the key ingredient in success of the Air Force offense is going to be who you have on the line. And we've got a veteran offensive line. Every player has started a game last year, and multiple games in most cases. And with us, it's not just our line blocking, of course. We've got tight ends that are very involved. Shout out to Caleb Rios from Ralston Valley in Arvada. He's going to be our starter. We've got 7 guys on this roster whose dads played on the team. Caleb's dad, Matt, was a good player for Air Force back in the day. Wide receivers block. We've got Brandon Engel. We've got Wyatt Wilson and some young guys behind them, and they'll be on the players to watch. But it all starts on the O-line with another good name, Thor Paglialong.
Oof.
Say that 5 times quick.
I can't say that one time quick. I can say the Thor part, though. You got me there. Well, that's an awesome name. And like you said, having those guys back on the offensive line is just a huge addition to have guys who have been there, done it. I really like that, honestly. And, is there anything else, though, that you can tell us about, some competition going on anywhere else that you feel is valuable? Or do you feel there's some positions there, they are set, here's who you have, and these guys are going to be change? These are going to be the key players.
Well, on the offensive side of the ball, I think our offensive line is very set. We've
5
got
is 1.
Yeah, we've got 5 guys that we will see all the time, and then we do have some depth. We have some young kids in there that you'll see. We've got a guy who's a senior named Mark Highstand. Mark's our biggest offensive lineman. back in the day, we didn't have any over 300 because of flight requirements. Now we've got the bigger guys. We've got a guy in the NFL and Nolan Loftenberg. So the offensive line is probably a 7-man rotation, possibly 8 early, and we'll get some guys getting some experience for next year. And, the rest of it, I think, is fairly set. Our ones are set. 2s and 3s are going to be subject to change.
And I have one final question. I've been getting a lot of people asking me about this just in general with the Congress's decision to have players basically not be able to go into the NFL draft until they complete their service, starting after December, I believe, of this year. Am I correct? A lot of people are very confused by that situation. Is there any way you can just shed a little bit of light on the decision behind this? And is there any hope of change, really?
Well, there's always hope of change, but specifically, this has happened in the last 15 years on four occasions, and it really has to do with an administrative look as far as what they want as far as immediate service commitments. In the most recent past, you've been able, if you were given the opportunity to play professionally, then what they would do is consider you an ambassador of that service academy. And then you would get to work in the reserves in your off time. And then, then when you were done, of course, you would start your full service. Yeah. And so they've changed that yet again. We've had some athletes over the years that really looked promising. And once they've thrown that out, and guys like Weston Steelhammer, another great name, and Jalen Robinette, guys that look to be drafted, in 16, 17, and they flipped back. So, it's frustrating, but really it'll come around. It's just a question of who it's going to affect.
Yeah. Good to know, though. It's something that I know a lot of people that are within, that know the services are connected to it, just want those players to be able to reach their dreams. And I see it as a fantastic tool when it comes to recruiting. I mean, that's just at the end of the day. When I remember seeing Ben Garland when he was in the NFL, they showed, did videos of him at the time Buckley Air Force Base, and all those different things that really inspired me as a young kid. And I think that's something very valuable that I'd like to see kind of be implemented again personally.
And me too. And just looking around, the guys that have served first and then played, or done a little bit of both, it's a great resume. And a couple of the other issues that we're dealing with that are always out of our control are couple rule changes. We one favorable, one a little less than favorable. The clock's going to be running a lot more, which if you're a ball control offense, you get excited. They were saying, oh yeah, you guys might have the number one defense in the nation, but they're not out there very much. Well, they don't need to be, and they're going to need to be out there even less if this offense has a very similar method and madness to running this ball. So that's a positive. One that's a little bit more challenging is nothing below the waist, right? So Air Force traditionally over the years has been a expert cut blocking team. Not the kind
not
of
chop block, cut block.
Thank you.
That's the key thing. It's so key that everyone assumes now for some reason a cut block is a chop block, but no, it isn't. And now it's gone from from college ranks, and that is just a shame because there's so little advantages as is. So keep going, Rick. I'm sorry.
Oh no, that's exactly what I'm saying, and the difference specifically is about engagement, right? So a chop block, if you're engaged with somebody and then they go low, a flag 9 out of 10 times if they're paying attention. Now we play a game where we tackle below the waist, but we can no longer block below the waist. So we got the best offensive line coach in the nation. They've made adjustments. I've seen them. They seem to be working, in camp. So that's
so are they staying higher up on the chess play and kind of keeping control there, or where are they what's their target in a sense now? Because for a lineman, for me, I mean, the chest plate was basically it, or the cut block. I really saw no other way to get control of a player, especially like if I was a center or nose tackle, I need to get control immediately. I just didn't see many other options.
Yeah, I've seen it a couple different ways this camp. A lot of shoulder, mid shoulder, but also just above the belt line, like getting those hips moved, right? So that's a very specific and very challenging task if you're going to be called for a below the waist block, is to be at the belly or the hips. So we'll see. It could be a real challenge, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
So kind of going back there, you mentioned the defense. Now, one thing I've always joked about and why I like to bet on service schools is, the defense is always going to be in the right position. They're not going to make too many mental mistakes. Is this your classic Air Force service school type defense where you're just not going to catch them napping very often?
Yeah, man, Air Force has had a history of some solid defenses. You go back, names like Chad Henning. I mentioned Weston Steelhammer. We've had stud linebackers. Chris Gizzy is one of them. Our coaching staff was basically all guys that were conference, recognized players. We got Ken Lamandola as one of the linebacker coaches. And, this is one of those things. It's tough in this format to say I may be seeing one of the best defenses in the 67-year history of the Air Force Academy. But I'll tell you what, they're top 5, and that's just based off last year's performance. And
this is a new era of football. Let's just be honest. This is where where Air Force has to face a lot of different kind of schemes and stuff. So I commend them for having tough safeties, tough defensive back group. And at the same time, they're controlling the edge, they're controlling the line of scrimmage. So for me, it's much more than just, hey, they're doing their job. They're doing it to the nth degree, in my opinion. And again, like you said, minimal mistakes. If there is a mistake, usually it could be attributed to like a weather related, a slip, something like that. You just don't see mental mistakes from the Air Force, and that is so refreshing. Honestly, I'm so tired of seeing holding calls every single game, no matter what I'm watching. It's just nice to see a team that is disciplined.
Yeah, definitely, and this is a really solid defense, and and like I mentioned earlier, if they're on the field less with the kind of or similar production to last year, it's really it's really exciting. And if you look at this defense, it starts on the defensive line. Of course, we've got a giant fire hydrant by the name of Peyton Zadroik, first team all preseason Mountain West. The kid is nimble for being that size, and just a young kid. Just completed his sophomore year, going to be a junior. We've got Jaden Thurgood on one side, who's a little banged up. We probably won't see him until maybe Utah State. We've got PJ Ramsey on the other defensive tackle / defensive end side. And at defensive line, we're going to eat. We've got some guys that are going to do well. The depth at that line is probably the best I've seen in a while. We've got Dan Grobe, a guy that'll probably be starting at defensive end until Thurgood gets back. We've got Caden Bloom, who probably see a lot of time in that defensive line rotation. We've got a lot of young, strong guys. So I think we'll be fresh, which is great. And that brings me to the linebacking crew. Pretty solid.
Yeah.
So at linebacker for Air Force, we're talking about the big 3. Bo Richter, guy that saw, and Tony will probably remember him from the first play against CU.
The fumble.
Yeah. So Bo,
I love how immediately you're just like, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and what happened was due to injury, Bo at 195 last year was called upon to be the right defensive end, and on the first play he had an interesting meeting in the backfield. Fast kid, as you would imagine, especially at that position. So he's back to his natural position at linebacker. Alec Mock is a guy you'll see on the first team list at the end of the year. Young kid, just like Peyton Zadroik, Alec's dad played for Air Force, so there's that lineage there. And then one of the best names at linebacker, Jonathan Youngblood, right?
Yes.
Got to have a Youngblood back there, you know.
We got a Thor. We have a Youngblood. I mean, we have a Jet. Where are we going next with all this?
I think I asked you this before. They're not related though. The Youngblood, right?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. It just worked out naturally, perfectly that way. It just happened to work out that way.
Yeah, that I'll actually get into some pretty significant DNA combos here coming up in a second, and that of course brings me to the back half of this defense, which is special. We're going to have some challenges at cornerback, just as far as guys that haven't had a lot of opportunity. We lost our starting cornerback in spring. He does look like he'll be back at some point with an ACL injury. We lost, and this is strange because we talked about until the end of your sophomore year, if you choose to leave, there's no penalty. Well, we had a guy that was going to be our starter at a senior by the name of Michael Mack II, and he made a decision to leave the Air Force Academy, and there's penalties financially that I'm sure he'll deal with at some point, but ends up in the Big Ten at Wisconsin. He's going to be in the mix there. Talked to Mike recently. So we're not going to see a lot of that, thank God, because that's something we just don't deal with at Air Force. And, the young guys back there, I think, are going to be fine. On the other side, we've got Trey Williams, Tom Collins, guys that you'll get to know. And that brings me to my favorite part.
Yeah.
That's the three-headed monster. And, that starts with Camby Goff, who plays a hybrid linebacker / safety position, affectionately known as the spur. He plays that at time. We've had some guys in the past very successful at that position. Camby is a physical specimen, hard hitter, led the team in interceptions last year, and he's going to be fun to watch. The strong safety is a guy by the name of Jaden Goodwin. Jaden is a stud. He's related to Marquise Goodwin, who is
the receiver.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, cool. Nice.
Olympian too. Let's not forget that.
Yeah, and Olympian. That's right.
Yeah, that very true. And you can see the talent is, he's from that lineage of parents and family members, very athletic, had a sister, WNBA, and played basketball in Europe. Got a brother that was highly recruited that's playing in California now. And all that being said, you'd say, man, that really looks like a decent defense. That brings me to our number one guy. You may have heard his name. His name is Trey Taylor. Trey is a senior this year, a super senior, by the way, because of some of the COVID stuff and turnbacks.
Right.
So he's been on every watch list known to college football for defense. Off the top of my head, the Bednarik, the Thorpe. He just recently made the Reese's Senior Bowl watch list, first team preseason. This guy is the real deal. This guy, with being a December graduate, will be somebody you will see on Sunday. Might look a little bit like J.L. Skinner last year, who he was just behind, on the second team on Mountain West. This guy's the real deal. He's a cerebral athlete, smart, charismatic, leader. When he's not playing, he's coaching his teammates to be better. Just excited about Trey. Trey's, a direct relation to Ed Reed. Have you heard of him?
Oh, never heard of that Hall of Famer.
His father, Tyree, was a stud athlete at SMU. His mom, Courtney, was a stud athlete at SMU. I mean, this kid's got potential, and really it's not enough with him. It's not enough to have potential to make preseason lists, which, means nothing to this young man. And I talked to John about this. This is the guy after the coldest bowl game in college football history, the Armed Forces Bowl against Baylor.
How cold was it? First, let's go over the cold.
-7 wind chill in Texas. I can verify that because I still have parts of my body that cannot fit.
That are frozen.
Were the refs able to use the whistle? I couldn't remember if they had to change
Not
it
in the
out.
fourth quarter. They had to go to plastic.
There
Oh
you
my
go.
goodness.
There you go.
Yeah.
It was.
Sounds
That's where
miserable.
it's. Yeah, it just reminds me of, like, again, when you see those refs and it's stuck to their lips, and all of a sudden they're like, "Crap, how do I get this off?" And
That
it's
ain't
just,
going. Yeah.
Well,
that is scary.
To continue that story,
Yes.
so after that game, I'm heading out of there, and Trey calls me and says, "Are you in the area?" I said, "Yeah, I'm 15 minutes away. Aren't you going out with your teammates and celebrate this huge bowl win over a Power 5 team?" And he said, "No, come get me. Tomorrow starts the 2023 season, and I work out at 5 a.m."
Oh man.
Who does that unless you're a guy that's destined to do this for a living? And
Yeah.
he's going to be fun to watch. So that wraps up our defense. Special teams are going to be, solid. We've got a rare third-year kicker who's just a junior. The punting battle looks like it's possibly going to go to Carson Bay, who's had the job. He'll be a third-year guy as well. So special teams is tight. We do not return the ball unless
I love that, by the way. I think I've told you this multiple times. As a Broncos fan, it has been too many times with muffed punts, with a block in the back, with holding, and then all of a sudden you're back up in your 5-yard line. I agree with what Air Force does, honestly, especially when you don't have punters. There's only 32 of them in the NFL. When you don't have punters exactly getting it down to the 5-yard line and making those really tight situations, might as well not return them.
Well, and you guys are just, again, listing off all of my rules of why I always take the points of a service school against a Power 5 team. They're not going to make mistakes. They're going to have great special teams. They're going to make their kicks, and they're not going to make mistakes. Easy money.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they want the ball, right?
Yeah, exactly.
They just bring out the offense and let's go. That's that's Troy Calhoun in a T. We've had some amazing returners over the years, and maybe they'll surprise us, but I would say probably not.
Yeah.
So some of the names to watch, guys that aren't starting now but are probably the future of this program. On an offensive side of the ball, be guys like Cade Frew. Cade was a highly recruited guy. Went to Bowles in Jacksonville. Bowles produced recently Mac Jones, a couple Air Force guys, Kyle Johnson, Jordan Jackson. He's special. He'll be wearing number 8 on offense. He's a guy that you will see get some touches, especially early. Another guy, Jordan Scarborough. He's going to be in the mix. He's playing that X position. And, and one of the big things, and I think I danced around it in the offensive preview, but when you're talking the success of this team, it wasn't we'll see what the fullback situation ends up or the quarterback situation ends up. It's really 3 things, right? John Lee Eldridge. Highest yards per average per carry in NCAA last year, 7.7 yards every time this young man touched the ball. Perfect complement to the Thunder and Lightning concept with Brad Roberts last year. More of the same to come, especially with Emmanuel Michel. You're going to see a guy probably slide down in the 6s, which is still amazing, but he's going to double his carries, and it's going to be something to watch. And John is a Christian McCaffrey 2.0 training guy, right? He documents all of his training, and it's jaw-dropping, the things that this young man does. So he's a senior, and we're going to see him. Back to the players to watch on defense, guy by the name of Jack Curtis, recruited out of the Dallas area. He's going to see snaps early. We've got Levi Brown from the Georgia area. He's going to see some snaps. We got a senior on offense, Jalen Johnson. Jalen, first carry last year against UNI, which is Northern Iowa, 80-yard touchdown score. And first time he touched the ball. John Lee, first time he touches the ball a couple years ago at Canvas Stadium, touchdown. So we've got some success back there. This is going to be an exciting team, and the sky's the limit. You guys got any questions about Air Force football?
No, I feel like this was honestly the best breakdown you can get for your time's worth. Honestly, that was a great rundown, and I feel like I know Air Force better, and it's one of those things where I think now I'm even rooting for them even harder. It's been one of those things where we did go to practice, Rick and I have to admit, I have to, wear a little bit of Army. The coaching staff was so nice to me. The players were so nice to me and respectful. I just have to add that on top of everything, that the people that are involved with Air Force, just seem to have that next level of just gratitude and thankfulness for everything they've been given. And that's special, I think. Yeah,
I see that. This brief preview doesn't even touch upon,
we're scratching the surface.
Oh yeah, this offense.
We're not even popping a balloon with this. We're just literally scratching.
This is literally a brief overview. This offensive line, I could tell you a little something about every guy, but this is enough info. And as we do our week-to-week previews, I'm sure we'll highlight a couple guys, and everybody will get some information out there. Yes. But I'm looking forward to seeing what our opponent has in common, John, and then you guys play each other, CU, CSU.
Yes.
I think that's going to be a real barometer on the current state of those two programs. So let's hear from my guys.
If you're ready, let's transition over to CSU then. We got Cam the Ram over there just getting us into Colorado State football. Personally, I'm very excited about CSU this year. I felt like, obviously last year they had a lot of turnover with a new coach in Jay Norvell, new offensive coordinators, defensive coordinators, and they had a lot of players that, weren't exactly their guys to say. They were able to bring a lot of players from Nevada that they liked, like Torrey Horton, Clay Millen. Those are the names that kind of pop off the list when it came to taking players from Nevada. And I understand completely. One of the reasons why Jay Norvell left Nevada was because, honestly, he was being paid as one of the lowest end paid coaches. So CSU offered him some more money. And of course he took that opportunity versus, staying somewhere where it was stagnant. There wasn't going much on in recruiting at that time. And at the same time, CSU was having some fresh stuff. And again, I would always take more money. I never am mad at someone for, going for the bigger deal, because it just makes sense. You only have a certain time to do this. And especially with his wife being, sick with cerebral palsy, it's just one of those things where I think he takes advantage of every single day, which is one thing I do like about him.
Well, and honestly, one thing I think you touched on a little bit there too, but the money that CSU has put into their program with the new training facilities, the new stadiums and everything, they're starting to rise up. I mean, that is a program that is dedicating money to their football team. And I think when you look at like a Nevada, kind of the impression there is that they don't care or are not willing to put the money forward that CSU has.
Yeah, and I think that comes down to some pretty simple things. It's economics for some of those schools where they have to focus on education first. That's where they're kind of, I'm not sure if it's their fiduciary obligation, but you would think so in a way, to focus on the school first. And again, when it comes to Nevada, they just could not pay Coach Norvell what he was looking for. And when it comes to some of these other coaches, Matt Mummy is someone who's been very, very innovative with the air raid offense, kind of a person underneath Mike Leach, and learned from him about that. They all had a little bit of influence on the air raid offense. They call it the Fort Raid offense in CSU right now. And honestly, I'm just very excited about this team. When you're looking at your quarterback in Clay Millen, and all of a sudden, last year he had some injuries, especially with the ankle, was not able to play a full season. I'm very excited what he can do with Torrey Horton with a full season, because you saw last year he was someone who was double teamed, had someone who was on top of him, man coverage, and someone over the top. They really just did not let him get much room, and he still had solid statistics because he is that kind of special player, where I do believe if he has a good season, he can be a first round pick. I mean, he's someone that someone that Jim Nagy said is on the preseason Senior Bowl watch list, Biliknikov kind of player opportunity. But at the same time, they got Justice Ross Simmons is someone who can kind of provide also some relief onto Torrey Horton, just because that way he's not taking all the coverages. They also got Dylan Jeffney, who was a SMU player. I think he brings some nice speed. It's kind of that slot kind of player, and I think he'll work out well. Really, when it comes to the wide receiver core, I feel like those are the strong guys we're going into, and they have some 2024 class guys that are very interesting in terms of wide receiver class that will help that pipeline once you lose a Torrey Horton or someone like that along those lines.
Well, you look at like a team like CSU, through all the losses last year, there were flashes. You could see where even a guy like Millen that was dealing with injuries, he still led all of FBS, I think, at the best completion percentage of the country.
That's one of those big things.
Yeah, so you definitely
he in the 77s, or was
I think he was low 70s if I see it right. So
but it's still an incredible number to be throwing in your completion percentage.
Yep.
And again, he was only looking towards Horton or kind of his checkdowns, which I understand. Right. So I'm excited to see him be unleashed and have another receiver that has potential. Actually, two more receivers with the transfer portal.
Yeah, that's great. And you talk about that, getting those transfer athletes. So anytime you can add talent from a Power 5 level, bring them to a Group of 5 team, obviously you would expect that guy to make that step forward.
Yeah, exactly. And when it comes to this offensive line, I find it really interesting what they had to do last year. Essentially, their starter his name is Jacob Gardner. They were in such a dire situation with injuries, with players that just were not going to be able to do their job, that he ended up switching on over to left tackle just because they needed someone that they could trust there. And the rest of the offensive line just was not there yet. So you're looking at guys from this offensive line that are transfers. And again, from maybe not from the highest tier of schools, but these guys have shown that they can do it, and they have the size for the first time. That's been a big issue with CSU. We were talking about Air Force having an issue with getting guys with size. Same thing happened with CSU very early on, and luckily this coming up class in 2024, they've really addressed that, where Bill Best, their offensive line coach, is now being able to reach out to these guys that fit his style of offensive line play, which is, again, those 6'7" guys, not as much those 6'4" guys when we're talking about on the edge for those offensive tackles, which is great, honestly. And
John, one of the things that I think is encouraging, especially after you described all these skill position players and still, they struggled last year. I think Millen was sacked probably most in the conference, but I'll tell you,
country.
In the country,
most of the country. Yeah.
Holy cow.
Mm-hmm. And that's with time missing, man.
Yeah. And this guy's got a lineage. His dad was a Broncos quarterback, an NFL quarterback. And, when we started this segment off, I got to tell you, my first thought when Cam the Ram ran out was, do not feed the animals. Right. And then we talked about Jay Norvell and his wife, Kim. We launched our page this week, and Kim was one of our first couple dozen followers. I did notice that. This is one of those things where, man, I'm really excited for the first time, probably since, and Tony mentioned this, since Cecil Sapp era, to see what CSU is going to put on the field. And we've got a lineman at Air Force, at Adam Karras. His brother Aaron Karras a sophomore at CSU, switched over also with Nevada. We're gonna have brother versus brother this year. I'm excited.
That's gonna be great.
Please continue.
Yeah, and one of the other great things that they have going for them is they have a graduate transfer in Kobe Johnson. I believe he's from North Dakota State. And at the same time, just a few days ago, maybe 2 or 1 day ago, Avery Morrow was actually allowed back onto this roster. He had to serve a 6-month suspension from the school. It was for personal reasons. They kind of didn't go into it. Didn't seem like grades or anything like that. So I'll leave it at that for now. But that means Kobe Johnson and Avery Morrow are going to be the guys to start for this team and kind of provide that spark. I think Kobe Johnson is going to be the guy who's more of a big play kind of runner, and when it comes to Avery, I feel like he's going to be the steady kind of guy, get you 3 to 4 yards every single play, not going to break one loose for 15, 20, but he's going to get the job done, especially though with this offensive line turning around completely. Again, now all of a sudden you have juniors, graduate transfers, all these transfers that have actual experience compared to the years previously where you had guys that have never played a game all of a sudden just being shoved into there and get going. So this offense is going to be a lot better. I hope Clay Millen has a lot more time to be able to use all these different weapons like we were talking about. And again, use some of these screens, different kind of ways of going about it. I'm just very excited for this offense. I think they have a chance to be, a very successful team when it comes to the end of the Mountain West Conference. I know they were at 4-8 last year. It's one of those things where, for me personally, I think that was, again, a first year for a guy, post-COVID and all those things going on. And it just was one of those things where I think it's good. We knew the CSU Rams were going to take time. And I'm glad CSU is allowing that time for Coach Norvell and his staff in order to get it right. Because if you were to give these guys 2 years, there'd be no chance of success. And I think that's an issue across college football and the NFL, honestly, in those landscapes.
Yeah. And I mean, again, like I spoke to it just a little while ago, you could see those flashes of, closing games and everything like that. Nothing's going to kill an offense more than getting sacked. So if they can cut down on those, and solidify that offensive line, I think the Rams can make some noise in the Mountain West.
Exactly. And then on top of that, Clay Millen doesn't have to, feel like he's being pushed in the pocket so much where he's kind of going backwards, has to float a pass. Those kind of things are very difficult to do when you're in the pocket instead of being able to move up there, step up and release a throw. So I feel like that's going to be a huge difference. Again, 4 new offensive linemen, but 4 well-needed offensive linemen were needed for this team. And then again, you have your center now back at his natural position where he was at left tackle. And, let's be honest, a left tackle should not be, 6'3". It's just not where they're at anymore.
Right.
Now it's that 6'5" is kind of, you're okay. You're not the tallest, but hey, you're almost there.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of weird in that sense for me. But again, when it comes to this defense for CSU, I think it really comes down to their safeties, honestly, and their cornerbacks. I think you have someone in Jack Howell who is someone that really everyone is watching for different kind of awards as well, similar to Jones there. And they have Henry Blackburn as well. So in terms of their back end defensive back coverage, they are very well set. And again, they besides that, they have experience up front, and that's one of those big things. Is at least they have some experience to go with that. Hopefully, able to get some more push, some take the edge and be able to stop some of these runs from getting out and breaking out. Just because that's been a weakness for them, honestly, is not keeping contained. So I want to see this team keep contained. For me, I'm not personally a big fan of the 4-2-5 defense, but I understand why they use it. Kind of in these situations, and it's almost become the norm. So I understand that. And again, when it comes to some of their cornerbacks, I think you have some guys that can be drafted. So I'm very excited about that. And even when we're talking about their special teams, Patty Turner is their is on punts, and he came from Australia all the way to here. They have a player from can't pronounce his name, excuse me on that, from Japan. So they're worldwide right now when it comes to CSU. And I feel like when it comes to special teams, they're going to actually be a very special team because they have Torrey Horton being the punt returner, and then they have Justin Ross Simmons, who's their number 2 wide receiver, as their kick returner. So they're going to be explosive on returns as well.
Was that Chingoze Anusium?
Yes,
there we go.
You got it for me. Yes, I thank you.
Bless you, Tony. I wasn't even gonna try.
Exactly, it's one of those things where I have it written down, and I was just like, you know what? I'm just gonna say the corners are doing well, but he really is someone who I think can earn his way up into a higher draft status. For me personally, it's kind of like Mekhi Blackman, excuse me, where he went to USC. He didn't see much snaps, but at the end of the day, they saw enough in practice and talking to him and those kind of things to see he's a zone coverage guy that can offer quite a ton. So that's what I'm hoping, the similar kind of thing. A team will say, hey, look, this guy can do man coverage. He can do a little bit of everything. I'm going to go ahead and I wouldn't say reach, but go ahead and select this player a little bit higher than others may anticipate.
Well, and you can see that, he has the size to play the position at the next level. You look at that new mold of corner. You're not getting the guys that are 5'10" anymore. You're looking for those corners that are 6'1", 6'2".
Exactly.
And you can see that Anusium, he has that 6'1", 200-pound frame while also playing a first-team all Mountain West type game.
Yeah. And that's very impressive. And for me, again, coming down the pipeline for the 2024 class, I am very excited. I think this is the best class Colorado State has had in really some time. They really focused on getting their offensive line strong. They have someone in Zach Smith who, about 6'7", 265. They're moving him from tight end onto the offensive line. Really just shored up the offensive line, which I really love to see, as well as, getting that quarterback for the future, as well as 2 wide receivers. One was a 4-star, for some reason dropped. That happens when they do consensus.
Don't play a game and all of a sudden he drops a star.
Exactly. I never understood that. It was one of those things. He didn't play a game. Nothing happened. The big thing is that Jordan Ross was expected to go to Colorado or Colorado State. And when he went to Colorado State, all of a sudden he drops one. It's interesting to see with that. But again, they have Dante Farrell coming over from, I believe from SMU, a 6'2", 175 guy. Corey Hall's coming in next year, 6'2", 200. So they are really set for the future for this Fort Raid offense, and I'm really excited to see what they can do with that.
So you said it's Fort Raid? I really like that. That's a good little nickname.
Yeah.
So in the matchup between your guys' school here next year, we're going to see the Fort Raid against the triple option. That ought to be some dramatic shifts each time the opposing offense takes the field.
Well, coming down to Rick's point, if they can get some 3 and outs, this is going to be pretty self-explanatory what happens to CSU. Now, if CSU can change that and not live off the big play only and can actually have long sustained drives, maybe it'll be something different. But until that time where I see long sustained drives, I've only am assuming big play opportunity. So for me, I do think Air Force lines up pretty well against CSU. What about you, Rick?
Yeah, they do. And, I'm excited about Jack Howell.
Yes,
it's funny. I was doing an XM deal yesterday, and one of the guy gets on there and call in and says, "Well, it's a travesty that Jack, that Jack's not on the Reese's Senior Bowl watch list, and he's a guy that's going to be in the NFL. And didn't you know his dad was in the NFL?" And I said, "Could I call a timeout, sir? Jack's a junior."
There you go.
And that's scary. That's scary when you're talking 100 tackle guy. Of course, their defense was on the field a lot last year. But man, this guy's a John Lynch prototype.
Right here.
Even Trey, even Trey Taylor is a big fan of Jack. And they're both ones in the backfield back there. He's promising, and we already know they've got a lot of guys we're going to see on Sundays.
Yeah, CSU has has really turned it around for me. I like what they're being able to do. Again, Avery Morrow gone from the suspension list. I'm not sure about Kingan Holmes. I know he's injured, but we'll see that. And again, when it comes to the CSU, I feel like Washington State is a winnable game, honestly. Though, if you can get off to the right foot, start 1-0, I don't think they have what it takes to compete with Colorado at Colorado kind of thing, and as well as just the amount that the atmosphere is going to be like. I just don't expect that. Middle Tennessee, I can give them a win there. I just don't, from my experience with Middle Tennessee, this is kind of their way to get some paydays. Again, with Utah Tech, I think that should be an easy win. I'm not even getting a logo when I'm looking up their information. So without a logo, I'm assuming they're not a great team. Utah State was disappointing last year, and I think they're going to kind of continue on that trend. So I would actually give CSU a win there. Boise State, I'm sorry, it's not going to happen. Boise State will be more of a conversation for Air Force, to be honest. And UNLV, I think that's going to be a close one. I really do think that's a close one. I think UNLV, and that's one of those, whoever makes the least mistakes is going to win that.
Is that in Las Vegas or in Fort Collins?
That's in Las Vegas.
That could be one of those games where it determines whoever's at home. You know what I mean? It just feels like one of those games.
Yeah, that's where I was kind of getting that feeling of this is a toss-up game, and whoever, especially with those atmospheres, if you make a mistake and under those pressures, I understand that. Now, so when it comes to Colorado State versus Air Force on October 28th, I think Air Force still has it. I think they're still the better team. They're more seasoned. Unless Colorado State can come up and really get the ball going, moving fast, I don't see how Air Force can drop that game.
Well, John, one of the things when I was going through the schedule, I've got that game. You got to look at the logistics, right? So we're coming back from Annapolis, Maryland. We traditionally have this jet lag for some reason, coming off of a very passionate service academy game. To go into Fort Collins, I've got this down as my second most difficult game on the schedule. Gotcha. And really, it could be the perfect storm if CSU is on their game. And I really am looking forward to seeing that one.
Yeah, exactly. Now that you bring that up, yes, this is a great way for them to attack a Air Force team that, again, if I were them, I'd want to receive the ball first, set the tempo, get things going as fast as possible for your offense, and then, wear out that defense and go for some big chunk plays. I think they can still go ahead and focus on an Air Force. And like you said, if they're coming off of either a big win or a devastating loss, they got to get it together fast, Air Force. So I kind of actually agree with you now that you bring that up. Air Force is going to have to be on their game, or else CSU is going to take advantage of it. It's just they're not the same team that's just going to sit there and take it, at least in my opinion.
Well, and it's a rivalry game, rivalries, especially intrastate rivalry games like that. You can never determine a right point range or whatever that you could bet on. I mean, they could be close, they could be blowouts. I mean, it could be anything of the above.
Yep. Yeah, and that's big at least for me when I think of the recruiting process. The big thing, is win the state is always kind of the mantra in my mind. You got to take advantage, get the kids that are in Colorado, bring them over into your program. And this could be a very key factor for why someone chooses CSU versus Air Force. So I'm very excited to see how the players that are going to visit these games, how they're going to feel afterwards, especially. So this is really going to be a big game for both teams. And then kind of just, going off a little bit more on their schedule. Then they face Wyoming right after on November 3rd. Wyoming just seems to always be a thorn. I don't know why. There a lot of times there are games teams should beat them, and Wyoming just somehow is able to hold on to dear life and make one last play and win. So Wyoming is a concern for me, but at the same time, I still think CU has a fair shot.
Well, and that's, again, it's one of those teams, like that was one of the most frustrating games to watch last year, was watching Air Force play Wyoming.
It really was.
They just one of those teams that just sticks around for way too long, or way longer than they should.
Right. And Rick, do you know anything a little bit about that? You know, what was going on with Air Force?
Yeah. So, man, we're going to hit this one real quick. So last year, 60% of the team came down with the virus. We went to Laramie, who is the black hole for Air Force football. We have not won in Laramie since I think 05 or 06. And it was exactly, that recipe for disaster, any given Saturday. Right. So it was rough. I mean, Wyoming's a thorn in a lot of people's sides. Craig Bolt's a great coach. And I do believe, I do believe CSU will win that game also. And it's going to be, like Tony described, throw out the records, rivalry, you get a boot. When we play,
exactly,
we get the Falcon Ram trophy. You guys get the old smelly boot,
Yeah. And moving on real quick, they have San Diego State afterwards. I think San Diego State is going to be a little bit too much to handle at this point. I feel like they're kind of the third team right now in the Mountain West. And again, it's one of those things, though. It's great for Colorado to be home. I know San Diego State is their stadium has been at least talked about as being very hot and just one of those things. So that should help Colorado. And then Colorado State has to finish off Nevada. I think at this point it's now more of a rivalry. Just because Jay Norvell came from there. And at this point, Nevada's still mad. They felt like they lost out on a lot, and that's why their program's not doing so well. I think it's for different reasons, but that's why Nevada will be an interesting game. I have CSU taking that game, though. And finally,
real quick, that Nevada game, this is kind of our crossover game, right? So I got guys at Nevada, got a call last night. Somebody that Tony will be familiar with is going to be their starting quarterback. So I really like that revenge factor, and I definitely see CSU trouncing them.
Yeah, Brandon Lewis, I assume, is the quarterback there at Nevada, and hey, I think that was a good decision for him to at least get on to a team where he knows he can start and give him, show what he has, the ability to do. Because I think when I've looked at, someone like Steven Montez, I didn't think he was going to turn out to anything. And hey, we still see him hanging around the NFL, USFL, kind of going back and forth. It's one of those things where it could be very, very nice for him in the end.
Well, and I was always a fan of Brandon. He had a fantastic coming out party in that Alamo Bowl against Texas, where he showcased his running ability. They mainly used his legs, and he was able to rip off some big runs there. And I always thought that would be incorporated into CU's offense a little more with him under center. But it's nice to see him move on to a starting gig in the Mountain West for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And that's our breakdown real quickly of CSU. Why don't we head over to the Big 12? Are we still calling it we'll still go with the Pac-12.
Hey, John, yeah. I got to take this opportunity.
Okay, go ahead.
I want to introduce Tony's segment because I think it'll be worthwhile. So coming up next, we will be talking about the University of Colorado Buffaloes and their prime opportunity to turn the program around. Take it away.
Here comes Ralphie, baby! Woo! The best mascot, leading, hopefully, a revitalized Colorado Buffaloes onto the field.
Yes.
When you look at Colorado, the amount of change that has happened over this offseason is mind-boggling, to the point where we're still adding players today. I don't know if you saw that, Rick.
Yeah,
but
go with this. Okay.
We literally had a linebacker join us from ASU today.
Yeah, free agency, Tony.
Free agency, baby. We're in the prime era of college football. And, of course, it all begins and ends with Coach Prime. You see what he has done with his roster to the point of bringing in 50 transfer athletes from the junior college ranks, the Division II ranks, the Power 5. He has pulled from all over this country, and it could not have come at a better time for a program that was in desperate need of being turned around.
Yes.
Colorado was without a doubt the worst Power 5 team in the country last season.
I'd agree.
What was it, 5 straight games where they lost by at least 25 points, John? Something like that.
I mean, at times it felt like by 50 or more, but we'll go with that.
I mean, it was just unreal. And it was one of those things where the first half against TCU, you saw we actually held Chandler Morris down for a little bit.
Yeah.
We held TCU down. They didn't score a point on offense last year. I was like, oh, okay, this could be great. 30, I think it was 31 unanswered. It seemed like nothing went right for CU at any point last year. Now, I mean, it's hard to even nail down who could be your starters because the amount of change that's happened. I, of course, always want to start up front because I'm a fan of the offensive line. I mentioned this with Rick, but, when you look at the pure forms of football, it begins and ends with the offensive line.
Exactly.
It's actually one of the few positions where CU has some guys from last season that are probably going to be starters. We look right up front at a guy like Van Wells, a guy that was a Pro Football Focus first-team freshman All-American last year. And one of the biggest men that I've ever seen play left tackle in Tank, Gerard Christian Lichtenheim.
Where's he at height? 6'7" or is that?
I think he's 6'10". 6'10".
Wow.
Yeah. I see Rick's reaction there. Yeah. He is not a small fellow. And over on the other side.
We're talking about CU basketball? Is that what you said?
Yeah, exactly. One of the guys that I've actually come a little friendly with here in the offseason is a guy that I've taken to calling Mount Washington. So if it wasn't good enough that we have a 6'10", 350-pound left tackle, we have a 6'8", 340-pound right tackle. Now, that is fall load. Offensive coordinator Sean Lewis and offensive line coach Bill O'Brien from Kent State. His name is Xavion Washington. And this man, he is a well-put-together man. So you start to look at what's forming on the offensive line there. It's what we addressed in the CSU segment. Can CU actually bring a functional offensive line to the table? And I think with some of these pieces that you're starting to be built, these big men, that begins to turn around this offense to the point where we can actually start consistently moving the ball down the field.
Now, what are your thoughts when it comes to some of the guard positions? Because, we don't know what's exactly going on with Tyler Brown right now. Yep. We don't, where do the Buffs kind of look towards without Tyler Brown? Because I assume he was penciled in as the starter.
Yeah, he was one of those guys that you really thought, following Coach Prime from Jacksonville State, he was going to be those guys that was going to lock down one of those guard positions. And he actually was the starting left guard throughout all of spring ball. It's since come out that not only has he been dealing with a bout of mono, but he's waiting on eligibility requirements from the NCAA. So since he is a second-time transfer that is not a graduate student, he has to apply for eligibility, and that's something that hasn't come down yet. Fortunately,
you know what, Tony? When I think about mono and an offensive lineman, my first thought is losing weight, and you just described, the front range basically, and wow,
right. And Tyler Brown is one of those guys that he's pushing the scales at like 340 as a guard, which that's a big man.
And coming from the South all the way to Colorado, Yep.
Now, I think CU has done something really smart, and they've gone out and reloaded, since that spring ball period. They've added actually another former Kent State offensive lineman in Jack Bailey. Now, he's the one and what's great about him is he's part of the cowboy collar gang. He still wears the old school cowboy collar up on his pads. So, he's kind of stepped in as that left guard. And then over on that right side, there's been a lot of competition. I had kind of joked about in one of my roster breakdowns for the offensive line that it was going to be the battle of the bees at the guard position. It was going to be Bailey, Brown, and Beebe. There's a guy named Landon Beebe that's come from Montana State. He was a consensus Division II All-American. He's been running with the first team, but he's also been competing with a guy named Jack Wiltie, who also came up from the lower college ranks and primarily played tackle at the lower ranks, but has been kicked into guard. And it's been a really lively competition between Wiltie and Beebe. So I have kind of been on the Beebe train since the start of since he transferred in.
Yeah.
But I think that's going to be an interesting battle to watch between Beebe and Wiltie. And I think you're actually going to see both play a lot when they try to spell each other.
Yeah, I was thinking Whitley was going to be the backup center, more or less. But it sounds like he has that opportunity, and that's what these guys have been that's all they're asking for from CU, is that opportunity to show themselves off with a smart offensive coordinator with, a good quarterback play who understands how to use the pocket, good running backs with vision. I think that's what they're looking for, at least as linemen, in order to feel like, hey, I can take this jump now, and maybe I can take the transition into the next level, which again seems like to be more of CU's kind of goal at this point, is to gain these guys somewhat paid if they're they have the ability.
Yep, exactly. And that, just kind of speaking to that quote from Coach Prime that he always says is he doesn't care about the NIL. He's trying to get people to the NFL.
Yes.
So that's really what I hope we can start to see with some of these linemen, because you can see the size, you can see the talent. Can they put it all together on the field? And I mean, if there's one guy to do it, it is Coach Bill O'Brien, because if you look up offensive line coach in a dictionary, it'll be his
Bill
picture,
O'Boyle.
right? Oh, Bill O'Boyle. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, Bill O'Boyle. You will see him next to that definition inside the dictionary.
It is great listening to this staff in general. You have Tim Brewster is your tight ends coach. He was the head coach of Minnesota for multiple years. I mean, I understand that staffs tend to have guys like that, but this is just an all-star crew, honestly, top down, bottom down. They're great at recruiting. So this is going to be a multi-year kind of system where they're going to bring in this fresh pipeline and bring in some guys, and I'm excited to see that as well, especially being able to. I spoke with Talon Chandler, and man, is he someone who gets you excited for the future and what he's building. The players themselves now are going out there and recruiting. It's amazing to see it that way.
Yeah, and he's a great follow on social media. Everything you see from him is absolutely all CU 100% of the time.
Yes,
so it's cool to see. And what a segue, talking about tight end coach Tim Brewster, because when you talk about offensive line, you always got to talk about the extension of the offensive line, and one of my favorite positions in football, the tight end position. Yes. We've had some weirdness going on with CU and their tight ends this year. So, we were in the Colorado Media Day, and I asked Coach Brown about tight ends because it's always something I'm very curious about. Yeah. And this was before all the news about Luis Passarello came out. Obviously, a guy that had stepped up, captured a starting spot in spring ball. He mentions that we're dealing with some injuries at the position. There's going to be some people out that you don't know about. And you kind of see everyone in the media room go, what? What is he talking about? And it has now since come out that Luis Passarello will probably miss a good chunk of the season with a knee injury.
Yeah.
But we have seen the blossoming of another player in Michael Harrison, a converted wide receiver. He's been with the program for a couple years, and he's starting to make some plays at the tight end position. He's bulked up. They said he's added about 20 pounds, and he's starting to be a real receiving threat for the Buffaloes, which has me excited, because if you have a tight end that can stretch the middle of the field, opens up every part of your offense.
I have to admit, I am very fond of Michael Harris because I had Tim Brewster on one of my shows one time, and he brought up Michael Harrison as his first kind of, hey, this is a kid that I want you to keep your eyes on, and we'll see what happens. And then all of a sudden, all those injuries occurred, and I'm just like, hey, that just made it feel all the more real, and that interview felt even better, kind of one of those things. So patting myself on the back. Sorry, guys. I just needed to.
You're good. You're good. That's great.
I just needed to. Thank you. I needed it.
And then, I mean, so you do look, obviously we do have a legacy at the position that is coming off of injury as well. And Caleb Fourier, he's a guy that has, flashed talent. Obviously he's one of those guys that can catch the ball, pretty good run blocker as well. It's just, can he stay on the field consistently? And then you have kind of the opposite end of the spectrum from Michael Harrison in Elijah Yelverton, where he's going to be probably your primary inline blocking tight end. He's going to be the guy that's moving muscle when we're trying to run the ball.
Yeah, is that going to become a little bit obvious with this team that they're going to be doing those kind of things, or are they going to switch it up enough where it's not so obvious?
I think they'll switch it up enough because when you listen to Coach Brewster talk about the position, he talks about that versatility. He talks about, even with a guy like Michael Harrison, where he's a converted wide receiver, he's like, wow, his blocking is really coming along. You need to keep it to a point where you could run either things coming out. You can't give away your tells with the guys you have on the field.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. And then where we really start to talk about complete change, you talk about the wide receiver position, where there is not a single scholarship player left from last season. So you have an entire batch of new names that you have to go through.
Yeah.
And it all starts and ends with two names that you guys are going to have to know a lot. One, Travis Hunter. This kid is going to be playing both ways all season. I didn't think it was honestly possible to have.
I didn't either.
Especially in today's game where everything is so specialized, and at a position like cornerback where you really need to spend a lot of time to hone your craft, to have Coach Sanders say something like, oh, he's working on offense because he can just fall out of bed and play defensive back. You see the talent that this kid possesses. And now you're starting to see his route running, the way he can high point the ball. The future is exciting for Travis Hunter.
Tony, to that point, is this the perfect coach for a guy that's playing cornerback and wide receiver? I mean, could you pick a better coach for this?
Yeah, no, I don't think you could, and I think that honestly speaks to the relationship and the foundation that those two have built together. You look at a guy like Coach Prime, where he was catching the ball, he was playing defensive back, he was even returning kicks well into the NFL. So you see that he understands the grind, he understands what's necessary, the time that needs to be put in for this kid to be able to play both ways. And then beyond that, we have another burner from this great state of Florida in Jimmy Horn Jr. And this kid is electric. You could even see it with, a pretty shaky quarterback situation there at South Florida. His speed jumps off the tape. We have those guys that are called two-steppers, angle breakers, whatever you call them. You could take the perfect angle and he's going to be flying by you. Beyond that. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say this. Even though the Buffs lost some guys with the receiver class, I think they just re-upped it. The players had no choice, even though they were such great players. Mm-hmm. It's just so many big names were brought in, and it's hard to work around that.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, you even see a guy like Montana Lemonius Craig, who I was really excited about. I think had a huge spring game. And then transfers out. It's one of those things where I think it's, they're finding their guys and they're going to stop at nothing to get them. And so those are probably the two names. Those are the burners that are going to be taken off the top of the field. The other two names I'm really excited about are Xavier Weaver and Javon Antonio. Now you look at Xavier Weaver, he's a little bit bigger wide receiver. He's probably that 6'1", 6'2", 200-pound frame that could work the underneath. And this kid is a route god. Like, he can run any route in the route tree.
Yeah.
And then Javon Antonio is 6'4", 225 pounds that can just bully around any of the other opposing corners. Now, he played at lower division college, but he definitely has the talent to play in the Pac-12.
And the thing is, for me, is that there's a lot of opportunity to play around with these receivers, and you don't have to keep someone winded. So again, it's about having these guys be able to be ready for the fourth quarter and finish the game. And that's what I'm really excited about with the Buffs, is they're going to have guys that are full of energy and ready to go. Yes, exactly. And they're a team that can consistently go 4 wide and come at you in waves of wide receivers. Look at
Tavares Dawson, you know, a guy that came in from Auburn. You look at even some of the freshman 4-stars that they've gotten in Adam Hopkins. You know, those are guys that, you know, you would have never thought a couple of years ago that a 4-star receiver could potentially redshirt at CU. We're actually staring at that, you know, this season. When we start to look at Sean Lewis, though, I think something that really stood out to me when we first got to meet him, though, was he talked about he was a tight end at the University of Wisconsin. And his Badger blood never leaves him. So even though we're going to be running 4 wides, we're going to be running the ball too, which I'm really excited about. And the crop of running backs that CU's brought in, again, another position where there's not a lot of familiar faces. You know, probably the biggest one that jumps out at you is Anthony Hankerson. You know, a kid that played as a true freshman last year. He's not the biggest guy, but he runs with power. You know, he kind of reminds me almost of like a Philip Lindsay, where he's not a big dude, but he's going to run you over.
Yeah.
And then beyond that, you know, we've added talent like an Alton McCaskill from Houston, a Cavassier Smoke from Kentucky, even a Savion Wilkerson from Jackson State.
Yeah.
Then, you know, as Rick had alluded to, when you talk about Air Force football, you got the Thunder, you also got the Lightning. And you can't get past the Lightning that is Dylan Edwards. He was, you know, the fastest high school player at the Army All-American game. You know, this kid can fly. And what has been really cool to see in a lot of the practice videos, I don't think I'm giving anything away to their opponents because I'm sure TCU's watching the YouTube videos too.
Yes.
But he's catching the ball. You know, they're going to use this kid in a lot of different formations.
Yeah, that's great to have the ability to just have him be you know, let's say that everything's covered. Hey, you check the ball down to him. He takes a 3-yarder to 15, let's say. Those are the big differences that make a team start to get those victories.
Yeah. And I mean, it was one of those things where he's making a name for himself on social media by trucking a 5-star corner that we're going to be talking about here in a little bit too.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, it's fun. You know, you look at CU's offense, it's one of those things that has been down in the dumps for so long. Seems like we couldn't score points, couldn't move the ball. Seems like we have the team now that could actually potentially keep us in games and put up some points. And that's all due to the fact that we have a really talented quarterback that's going to be coming to us in Shedeur Sanders. I had mentioned this, you know, I'd done some preseason Q&As with Frogs of War. Shout out to Anthony North. But we've been doing some Q&A with them. And I think obviously it gets lost a little bit when you have the coach's son being the quarterback. I think a lot of people look at the name first and not the talent. This kid's a legit first-round quarterback if he plays up to his peak. You know, he could be a kid that is drafted in the first round of the NFL. He's got the accuracy, he's got the size, he's got the arm, and he can take off and run when he needs to in order to make a play with his legs. I'm really excited about the future of Colorado under Shedeur Sanders.
Now, let's say he doesn't have the best year just because it's a new team. Do you think he stays on and tries to earn that first-round grade and really cement himself in that first-round area?
I really do. You know, I think this is going to be one of those things where if he has a rough season, which, spoiler alert, I don't think it's going to happen. I'm one of the more bullish people when it comes to our records, as you'll see here in a little bit. But I really think he's going to have a good season, you know, but it could be one of those things where if he thinks he needs a little more time, I could see him coming back for his senior year.
Okay. Makes sense.
Now we move over to the other side of the ball. I mean, this is where we really needed some work. You know, I mentioned it at the top of the segment, the amount of games that we were just absolutely blown out in last year. It was depressing. And to see the changes that we've made, first and foremost, bringing in a guy like Charles Kelly, who has run a stellar defense at the University of Alabama, is also a tremendous recruiter. You see where we have started to turn the corner, bringing the type of athletes that can actually keep us in the game. It all starts up front, and I think, you know, you kind of mentioned it before. You mentioned kind of the 4-2-5, and I think, Rick, you kind of mentioned this with Air Force. They kind of play that modified 3-3-5. I think you're going to see that a lot out of CU as well. They have a lot of talented secondary players and a lot of talented safeties. Again, as I wrote, in my safety breakdown, we're flooded with talent at the safety position. If you look at our backups,
yes, you are. Roderick Ward is a backup. I mean, that's just crazy to me.
Yeah, Roderick Ward, is a guy that's absolutely started at Southern Utah, and I would think that he's probably just going to be a sub-package player on passing downs, which is just kind of boggles the mind to me. But you see that back end. You see guys like a Trevor Woods, a guy that absolutely plays with his hair on fire and throws his weight around when he greets a ball carrier. Kind of same mold of Miles Slusher, a kid that has had tremendous seasons at Arkansas, dealt with a little bit of injuries the past couple seasons, but if he's healthy, he could be that almost nickel safety, or like I think you had mentioned it. Was it the Spark position at Air Force? Was that the third safety position, Rick?
Yeah, we call it the spur. You're close.
Spur. I was close.
Starts with an S.
Yeah, starts with an S, but it's like that third safety mold, that kind of can play
the hybrid.
The hybrid can kind of play that nickel corner, nickel safety, but can also, play your traditional safety and kind of move your slots around.
Right.
And then we have another Sanders on the back end in Shiloh Sanders that has chosen to come and play his last year at CU. So I think you start to see that starting three in that 3-3-5 start to come out when you look at a Woods, a Slusher, and a Sanders. Those are going to be the guys that are backing up that defense.
Yeah, and real quick, it took Sanders a little bit of time to kind of get on over to CU. Why do you think that was? Was he weighing his options or just kind of taking his time to let his body heal? He's done a lot with Jackson State. He's a hard-hitting guy. You think that was more of the idea there?
I think it was a little bit of that. I also think it was too. I think he didn't want to get in the Tyler Brown situation. So if you notice, he waited to commit until after he graduated at Jackson State. So now he counts as a graduate student, which means unlimited transfers. Which
there you go.
He would be another guy that would meet that 2 transfer rule, having gone from South Carolina to Jackson State, then Jackson State to Colorado if he hadn't graduated.
That makes a whole lot more sense because I was trying to figure out why he was delayed, and now that makes perfect sense. And you almost wish Travis Brown went that route because he knows his offense. Again, the only thing I would have wanted from him is to get acclimated to the altitude, essentially. It just sounds like that seems – I did speak to him, and I had a good interview with him. It sounded like the biggest thing was, hey, just getting acclimated to the weather and the altitude, which was a lot of players' feelings, especially from the South.
Right. And it's funny because I actually talked about that with Javon Antonio as well. He was like, the altitude is no joke here, man. And I'm like, yeah, I'm from here, so I know nothing different. I've kind of always
like when we go to the lower level, we're just like, hey, everything is so nice and breezy. Yeah. I can run, I can drink, I can do whatever.
Right, exactly. So you look at that back end. We have some talented safeties to, again, go along with the Travis Hunter.
Yeah.
And crazy enough, I don't think Cormani McLean is actually going to start this year. Which
if he's not ready,
don't
force it. Don't force it.
Exactly. No, I totally agree with you. But again,
the fans. What about the fans?
Right. The fans will freak, but calm down, fans. Let me tell you where we're at here. You could have never imagined a year ago that we wouldn't need to start a 5-star. That's where CU football's at. We look at Travis Hunter, we look at an Omarion Cooper, and we look at a Kendrick Breedlove. These are some talented corners, you guys.
I have a question. What is a 4 and a 5-star athlete? Because we don't see them at USAFA.
You guys don't need those. You've been kicking our asses for so long. You don't need the 4 and 5s, okay?
Well, CSU is finally starting to get a few 4-star guys, and they're just this is the biggest kind of thing for them because that's really their maximum in terms of recruitment.
I take that back. We do have 5-star athletes. They're just a 3 and a 2.
Yeah, there you go. And I think that just honestly, just as a quick aside, I think that speaks so much to the coaching staff and everything that Troy Calhoun has built at Air Force.
Yeah.
I mean, they get their guys. Like, it's so amazing that the service schools do what they do with the talent that they get. It proves that stars really don't mean anything when you actually hit the field.
Right. And for me, just, listening to these guys and hearing what they're going into for their, engineering, where they're going into for their future, it's just so huge to hear that from the Air Force players and the ones that, are going to be your future leaders. That is where I get very excited about this team, because they've learned so much on top of what they've already been taught.
Right.
It's just very exciting.
Yeah. So again, Buffs fans, don't freak out. You have some talented back-end players that Cormani is learning from. Kendrick Breedlove comes to us from Ole Miss, very talented 4-star athlete that was a hot commodity on the transfer portal. And Coach Brown won the sweepstakes. We have an Omarion Cooper, guy that's gotten a lot of playing time in Florida State, has shown out in fall camp so far. We have a really good back end that I think is going to surprise a lot of people. When you start to move down the defense here, again, when you look at that 3-3-5, the way it's kind of – CU's done this a few years now, where you have to look at the players and not the position that they're playing, because they try to confuse you with the positions that they're playing. So CU will start 2 inside linebackers next year, even though they're not doing a traditional 3-4. The 2 that I think are probably going to hit the field first are Demoy Kennedy and Marvin Ham. Now, Demoy Kennedy is a lightning rod at the linebacker position, having followed Charles Kelly from Alabama. This guy is speed. That is his game. He is a big linebacker, yes, height-wise, but, little thinner, but can move. And this kid is going to meet players at the ball. He's going to go get the ball. On the other side, Marvin Ham, he's one of the few guys that's, again, like a Trevor Woods from last year's squad, and everyone kind of thought that the job was going to go to Levante Bentley, transfer from Clemson. That's a guy, I had pegged, he could be wearing the C on his chest. Marvin Ham has done so well, even through the linebacker coach, Andre Hart, saying basically, I'm trying to get rid of you. He came out and said, like, I'm trying to get rid of this kid. And I just couldn't do it. Yeah, couldn't do it. So Marvin Ham is a guy that's shown tremendous toughness, was one of the first to earn his jersey during spring ball. He earned his jersey. He has played well. He's going to be the starter, in my opinion.
I like that. To be honest, I wasn't expecting that name to be the inside linebacker, like you said. I was thinking a lot of, Levante Bentley, and just, even when it came to Jeremiah Brown, I thought was going to be someone a little bit ahead of him, and maybe even Brendan Grant. So, there was a few guys that I had there. So if you get that on the money, I gentleman's bet, I owe you something.
Sounds good. And I think it's one of these things, you talk about the names, I think it's kind of been one of those things at each position. I named 4 or 5 names for 2 starting positions. It's going to be that Alabama mindset where you run guys in and out. You're not ever going to have anyone that gets too tired. You have backups that can come in and play. I think a lot's been made that CU hasn't built up enough depth. I think that's wrong, because I think when you look at each position, safety, I think we have a top 6 that can play. Corner, I think you have 4 and 5 that can play. Linebacker, that inside linebacker position, you got 4 or 5 that can play. The depth that they've started to build is one of the things that's most exciting to me about the defense, because you could just see it last year where they would hold for 1 or 2 drives and then all of a sudden the wheels would fall off. Even in the middle of that Air Force game, you have Air Force jump out to, a 21-7 lead, 21-something lead. And then all of a sudden, the defense got a few stops and they scored, I think a field goal or something. They were driving the ball and then made a fumble. And then just the wheels would fall off. Air Force started to churn out those yards. And it was just the guys could not get off the field. They were dragging their tongues. It's because you couldn't rely on quality depth. And I think that's something that CU's really built up.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say last year I felt like especially early on in some of those games the defensive line was able to make some penetration, but by the time the second quarter was running around they were gassed. I mean, especially with the offense doing a lot of 3 and outs, there was just no push on pass rush when it came to the running downs. I think that's where again you're talking about these ability to swap guys in and keep them healthy and keep them feeling fresh versus that comparative, hey, you're the guy, you have to hold on all game or else we're in trouble.
Yeah, exactly. And that's just one of those things where they built up the depth. You got to play that complementary aspect of football where you can't just have the offense going 3 and out every time. Doesn't matter how much depth you have if they can't move the ball. And I think that's, again, one of those things that Rick talked about. You have an offense that can control the clock for 35, 40 minutes of a game. Your defense doesn't have to do much. It's great. They can get, 8 stops maybe in the entire game, and the game's over. It puts pressure on that offense to say, in one of these 8, you have to score. Don't you think, Rick?
Yeah, you know what? That's a great point. It's just about, depending. It's such a fight. The balance with the offense and the defense, and that's the perfect segue for special teams for CU, because I've noticed recently, and maybe you can give us a little more information. I've seen a lot of Mason Crosby. So that's kind of cool. One of the all-time best kickers in the history of Colorado.
Yeah. I'm hoping he gets a job here soon. I think he would look good in orange and blue, don't you think, John?
I agree, and I happen to think that the kicker that is for the Broncos roster is not on the roster yet. So we will see.
So I'll go with the obvious line of you're telling me there's a chance. Yes. John, you're telling me there's a chance.
There's a chance.
Oh, that's awesome. Just real quick, the last point I want to bring up on the defensive line, and what I was kind of alluding to when I said CU tries to confuse you with your position. By position, they're going to run a 3-3-5. By actual look, it's going to be a 4-2-5. Here's why I say that. The players that they have listed at outside linebacker are never going to be dropping in coverage. Yeah. That is where their pass rush is going to come from. That is where Jordan Dominic lives. And he told me personally, along with making a New Year's 6 game as his goal, he's looking at 15 sacks. That's his personal goal. Which, I mean, if he has 15 sacks, he's a first-round pick.
Yeah.
On the other side, you have the defensive end position, which is a little more traditional, and that's your hand in the ground. That's probably going to be Tajay Alston, which is a little surprising. He's a guy that transferred pretty early from West Virginia, but I've been seeing getting a lot of starting play with the, in the well-off media videos. I've been seeing him a lot with the starting defense. Played pretty well at West Virginia. Wasn't a guy, I was looking at him maybe a Derek McClendon, get 2 kind of pass rushers out there. But Alston has played really well in that spot. I think he could be a guy that could lock out the defensive end position. And then you have 2 defensive linemen essentially playing that nose guard kind of 3 technique. Yeah. Okay. First and foremost name you have to get out there, Shane Cokes. Learn that name. This guy has versatility to play any spot on the defensive line. And that's, again, something he's told me personally. He went through, he's like, I could play a 2-eye, I could play a 3, I could play a 4, I could play a 5, all the way down to a wide 9. Like, he thinks he could be all the way out on the, outside shoulder of the tackle and getting a pass rush.
I love that.
And it's one of those guys that you absolutely need. He is a guy that can play up and down the defensive line.
Good sized kid, Tony.
Yeah, he comes from Dartmouth, so he's smart, that. But he's about 6'3", 280. So he's in that good 3 technique kind of size where he can kick down on passing downs or kick up on rushing plays. He could play that defensive end position, or he could, even be a nose guard on pass rush situations and get after the center. At that other defensive line, that's where you're really seeing a battle here. And there's a couple names that have been mentioned throughout the offseason, and this is kind of the position where I haven't really named down a starter because it's changed every time I've tried to predict it.
Yeah.
So we have a Leonard Payne, who's, again, a bigger guy, going to play that nose technique. A Amari McNeil from Tennessee or a Bishop Thomas from Florida State. It'll be one of those three, and I think you're going to see a lot of those three throughout the season. And I know Bishop is a guy that you're interested in, John. I know he's one that's jumped out to you.
Yeah, he's been someone, at least from what I've read, is kind of that, at least I've heard, been a guy who has like great burst, great acceleration, and that's been kind of one of his big traits going on. He's able to get off the ball very quickly.
He was stop me if you've heard this before, but he was a 4-star that committed to play at Florida State, then transferred and came to play with Coach Prime. It's why Florida State fans are so pissed off at CU in the best sports, but they can be mad all they want.
Yeah.
And then when you get into special teams, Rick, I totally agree with you. I think it's something that even though you see the loss of a pretty good kicker and going to a rival like Utah, I think they've rebounded pretty nicely. And one of the areas it's going to sound weird because you're not normally excited about a punter, but Mark Vassett is a really good punter at Louisville. He had set the career record for both yardage in a season and in a career at Louisville. And now he's going to be kicking in the thin air at Boulder. I mean, this kid might average 50 yards a punt. Like he can boom the ball.
Very familiar with him, and that was kind of why I jumped the gun on the special teams. So we saw him in our bowl game that we played, 2 years ago. Man, that guy's got a leg for days.
And another Aussie. I know you had talked about that with CSU, John, but yeah, that guy's got a rocket. I mean, he can actually boom the ball, which normally you're like, I was a punter. I'm like, no, that can win you games. If he can flip the field and stuff like that, that's, again, where we talked about earlier with Air Force. I mean, as long as you don't make mistakes in special teams, you can win a lot of these games. And it's that hidden yardage that fans never talk about. And then I think we have a really interesting kicker battle between basically a power leg or an accurate leg. Which one do you want? You got a Jace Feely, who's the son of a former NFL kicker, came in from ASU. This kid, again, can boom the ball. I mean, I've seen videos of him hitting from 50. And then you have Alejandro Mata. I mean, he just doesn't miss kicks. And he even talks about it. He told Michael Irvin this week, he doesn't miss kicks. So it's really, which way do you want to go? Maybe it'd be a situation where we see a long-range kicker and a short-range kicker both being used throughout the year. But I think it's a really interesting battle at the kicker position.
Yeah, I agree. I really like your idea of having the two guys kind of switch it up. I mean, I'm just going off of the spring game, and that's really hard to go off of. And obviously Jace had some issues, but again, there was some snow there. They it wasn't full kind of go at it. So I can't really complain about those misses when he did that, to be frank.
Yeah. So now when you kind of start to go through the season, this is one of those things where, we just recently wrote about, and I think, John, you're going to pull it up for the fans to see. Over here at Colorado Buffaloes Wire, our editor, Jack Carlo, great editor, shout out to Jack. He put together, we had worked with all of the writers here at Buffaloes Wire and a couple of the guys from the Trojan Wire and I think from Ducks Wire, to look and kind of go through all of the games that CU is going to play this year and kind of give a round table record prediction. As you can see from me, I've been very bullish. I did a way too early record prediction where I predicted 8-4. And when you see an over-under of 3, I mean, I think that's probably going to jump out at you. But as you can see, this is one of those things. I'm one of the few that I think we're going to actually go in and steal the win at TCU. I know we're a 20-point dog. I know everything. I'm on the hype train. Like, I fully bought in. This team, I think it was Ben Carey. He's a pretty prominent bettor here in Colorado. He said the books are just wrong about Colorado and win predictions. Like, there's money to be made betting the over on that 3 wins right now. You can see when we go into Nebraska, this is actually one of those games where I think a lot of us predict a win here, especially here on the staff. We haven't lost. What's the days up to, John? The haven't lost since.
I don't have the days on me, but there's an account that does it every single time where you can look, and if you follow them, hey, it's been this amount of days. So for me, just keep that streak going.
Keep it going. So what it is, Rick, it's a funny Twitter account where you could look it up, and it's the day since Nebraska has beaten CU, which obviously, since we're not conference rivals anymore, it's been 4 or 5 years. The days are in like the thousands by this point. It's just a funny running tally that they keep going. But as you can see, a lot of us on staff here believe that CU is going to capture that win against Nebraska.
Yeah.
So, a lot of us maybe saying 1-1, me, the homer, the bullish, whatever you want to call me, 2-0.
Next, we got
Colorado State. That is going to be that resumption of the Rocky Mountain Showdown. As you can see, I think this is a clean sweep, even with the outsiders of the Oregon and USC wires. I think that's just one of those things where it's both teams are headed in the right direction, but the talent that CU has secured is it's off the charts. Like, they're bringing in 4 and 5 star guys. They need to get them to play the right way. But if they do, I see this as probably a pretty easy win for CU.
Yeah, I agree. Now here comes.
This is a tough block. Yeah, this is probably a loss. Having this is a road game in a very hostile environment. Outson Stadium is always rocking. This is going to be one of those things where I don't see CU doing it unless, injuries could always play a factor. Maybe you're not playing a Bo Nix. Maybe, their season falls off the rails. But, this is just one of those tough games.
Yeah, I agree. That's a definitely hard one. And then here we get to USC.
This is where fans are going to be really happy with me. CU finally gets the win against USC. It's maybe one of those things where I'm just trying to will it into existence because we're 0-15, but it has to happen in the last year. It's at home. It's one of those games where we've played them tough. Even last year in the lost season, we were one of the 3 interceptions that Caleb Williams threw. You know what I mean? Yeah. We got 1 or 2 of them, one of them, I think. But this is the year. This is the year it has to happen. So last year, the Pac-12, let's send them to the Big Ten with a loss. Just one, baby.
I agree. And then next we got Arizona State.
Yeah, I think this is going to be one of those tricky games where, obviously I had said, if you're coming off the upset, I think this is just one of those ones you can't get back up for. It's a very winnable game, especially with Arizona State starting a true freshman. But it's just going to be one of those things where you're so hyped up for the USC game. I don't know how you match the intensity.
Yeah. Sometimes after those big wins, you just kind of fall flat, and it's hard.
Yeah, exactly. But obviously, as you see, you see a lot of, a couple of the guys at the top, like a Jack or a Matt, saying, hey, we're going to lose to USC and beat ASU. It could be one of those things as well, too.
Yeah, definitely. And as we move on
we got Stanford.
I think this is everyone, I assume, put win. Yeah,
this is another one of those sweeps. Stanford just isn't playing at the level it was when Harbaugh was the coach, or even like when David Shaw was the coach. I think they've just, they've kind of gone the route, like you were saying, of the academics. Maybe, that's just the more important thing right now.
Exactly. And then next we have UCLA. This one should be interesting.
Should be an interesting one. Again, you have a team starting a new quarterback. Obviously, DTR was the guy that played really well in.
He's looking great with the Browns.
He is. Yeah, he's playing really well. This again is just one of those things on the road. I think it's going to be one of those tough games here in UCLA. Chip Kelly offense, but it could be one that could be stolen.
Yeah, no, definitely. I could see that, and we'll move on over to Oregon State with a new quarterback. How you feeling?
I don't feel good about this one. This is one of those games where you could see where Oregon State pushed us around last year, and I think it's going to be another one of those games. It's at,
wow.
It's a tough one. Oregon State is one of those smash mouth football teams, almost like an old school Wisconsin, where they're just going to grind you under their heel. It's almost to the point, Rick, where they're a service school almost. They're going to run the heck out of the ball. So
yeah, I am surprised a little bit that everyone went with a loss, but everybody had the same kind of consensus feeling. So week 11, you got Arizona
Win. This is,
Win.
again, another one of those games that I think CU can take. You know, they're at home. They can win this game.
I agree 100%. I think they have some talent, but it's not quite up to what CU has. Next, we got Washington State at Washington.
This is honestly a coin flip. This is one of those games where today I could say they could win. Next week I could say they lose. I think that's going to be really telling is how Washington State plays against CSU in week 1 in Fort Collins.
Yeah.
Because this is going to be a great barometer of not only how CSU is going to go, but CU Wazoo is going to go.
No, that makes perfect sense. And I do like that it's kind of a toss-up one, though, too. You know, you got to have those. And then here's another giant. You got Utah. We got
kind of the same feeling of Oregon State. You know, they're that smash mouth team. They're the bullies of the Pac-12. I think they're going to continue the streak, unfortunately.
Yeah, and at this point, you know, that is the schedule. We'll get moved through those ads, but it's one of those things where I think that this team, according to the way you're looking at them, they're making a bowl. And to make a bowl after being one of the worst teams, I mean, let's be honest. For me personally, it was the worst football I watched personally ever.
Yeah.
Other games I would have turned off, but with CU, I kept it on just because I felt, you know, there was a need to. And man, was it tough just to see some of those things, even though the bright spots like Owen McCown or something like that just never gave me enough of a good feeling seeing this team is going somewhere in the future. And I can't believe just a few weeks later after Mike Sanford is, you know, the interim head coach, all of a sudden you get Prime in and it's just a completely different organization essentially.
Yep. It was the right coach at the right time. It was absolutely what was needed for CU. And I couldn't be more excited about our future.
Same.
You should be. You know, here's the $1 million question, Tony. So with John, you know, he described Jay Norvell kind of, I think of him as a little bit of an old school type of coach, maybe a Herm Edwards kind of guy.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
Troy Calhoun, he's very what you see is what you get. If you're interviewing him, he's going to talk about comparisons to baseball and basketball analytics.
You taught me that. I can't believe it. I look back, he does.
Yeah, look back. It's crazy. So tell us about primetime culture and the impact that you expect it to make on this program.
Yeah, you know, I think you know, it's kind of what I alluded to with like a Shedeur Sanders, where you see the name and you see the name before you see the talent. You know, obviously Deion Sanders is one of those guys that's going to be putting himself out there. Let's say it that way. He's going to be one of those guys that is the loudest voice in the room. But there's a lot of substance to that style, which, you know, to borrow an old phrase of substance versus style, I honestly think he has more of that old school mentality. So when you saw like players having to earn their jerseys and their jersey numbers during this spring camp, and what he talked about with, you know, guys are just handed things. Like he talks about number one. You got guys that haven't even earned anything yet that want to come in and be number one. That means you're the man. No, that was earned when I was, you know, growing up, when I was playing ball. I think he's a lot more closer to the old school coach mentality than most people would see just from the YouTube videos and the commercials and all that stuff. So I think he honestly has that old school mentality, and he is whipping those kids into shape in the Troy Calhoun, Jay Norvell method, just with a lot of flair to back it up.
Yeah, I see it. I'm excited about it. And, you know, if you want to look at somebody's integrity, you really, and this is a great point, you got to look how they treat their children, right? And it's very well documented that his son was late for a meeting, but before a major game. And sorry, bud,
you're benched.
Yeah.
Yep, he benched him, and I think Travis Hunter too. So,
yeah, for me, it's one of those things where I think I see him as the perfect kind of storm right now for what the NCAA is, and he's being able to be that old school coach when needed, but at the same time, he's able to promote his players, give them different opportunities, being able to put your handle at the back of your jersey instead of, just your name, just being able to reach out in different ways to be successful beyond, let's say it's beyond going to the NFL, they can be successful in other ways. And I think that's where Dion is kind of creating that new culture that probably will take effect, I think, in overall in the NCAA eventually.
Agreed. All right, boys. Well, we've been at it for more than 2 hours. You know everything about the Rams, the Buffaloes, and the Falcons now. And we will be back.
Are we still just at the surface of the balloon, though? And
we're still just at the surface. Even after 2 hours, we're at the surface.
Even at that. Isn't that crazy?
You know what? I think it's great because here's what we've came up with in a little more than 2 hours. We've got each one of our teams making a bowl, which is great. So that's that's unifying for the state of Colorado. We have bright futures as far as young players and schemes and really most importantly, I think to the Colorado fan base, we have that crazy 4-letter word, hope.
Hope, yes, baby. Hope.
Yes, we do. And that's the first time I think we can say this in many years outside of Air Force. I think that's huge. I think Colorado is going to be changing its landscape in general. All of a sudden, we're going to see maybe some, more players coming to Colorado to play high school here and, try to find an opportunity. I just am very excited for what's coming down the pipeline for each and every one of these teams. I want them all to do well, and I'm pumped. I don't know what else to say that I can't wait for these Fridays where we're able to go over the teams and, again, get ready for the preview and then also talk a little bit about the game as well that happened the week before.
Yep. I'm excited, boys. This is going to be a fun season.
So let's sum this up. So I know Tony just predicted 8-4. I'm going to go and be a 9-3 guy. What's your final tally there, John?
Let me go back real quick. Forgive me. Let me see. I got.
While he's looking that up, Rams fans, tell John what style hat he should buy for next week's podcast. He wants a CSU hat.
I love
I love the blue. Tell him the style that we should be getting on top of that head.
Exactly. And I got a big head, by the way. I need an 8 for my head size.
Listen,
so that's crazy.
What if I got you one of those hats that have the ram horns on it? Would you wear that?
The ram horns. I'm trying to think of what you mean by that.
So look like old style medieval. There you go.
There you go.
Wait. All right. I mean, hey, we can do it. Rock it. We can put on the helmet and everything, and I'll be able to see just be like this the whole time. I'll be right in your guys' faces, and hey, that would work. It looked dope, at least for the beginning. Then I take it off, and then I put it to the side, maybe where I could at least say, hey, this is my helmet. Just rub it a little.
There you go.
But back to when it comes to CSU, I have them winning. Let's see, 1. It's a toss-up.
I was counting.
I have 6. I have them at 6. I'm at 6.
So bowl eligible. Everyone bowl eligible.
And wouldn't that be great for the state of Colorado?
Oh, gotta be awesome.
And then again, we're not even getting into the Colorado School of Mines and how deep they can get into their playoffs. And there's just so many other schools, UNC Bears, and how they're kind of recovering after Ed McCaffrey's left and how they're doing there. So if you want to come in, join us when we start going with the live chats. Please come in, and we'll answer your questions as they come in.
Awesome.
All right, guys. I think we've reached the time limit at 2:15. Why don't we get out of here? If you guys have, unless you guys have anything else to say, I think we're good.
I think we're good.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. We'll be out of here.
Okay.
Go and try your luck. Catch me in again. We let it